Hi, welcome to Minutes with Coach Missy. Today's topic is grief and depression. When you lose someone or something dear to you, it's natural to feel pain and grief. The grief process is normal, and most people go through it. But when grief takes over your life and you begin to feel hopeless, helpless, and worthless, then it's time to talk to your doctor about telling the difference between normal grief and depression. Grief is a natural response to death or loss. The grieving process is an opportunity to appropriately mourn a loss and then heal. The process is helped when you acknowledge grief, find support, and allow time for grief to work. Each year, between 5 and 9% of the population loses a close family member. But that's not the only kind of loss that can cause grief. People can feel lost when they become separated from a loved one, they lose a job, position, or income, when a pet dies or run away, when children leave home, or they have a major change in life such as getting a divorce, moving, or even retiring. While we all feel grief and loss, and each of us is unique in the ways we cope with our feelings, some people have healthy coping skills and they're able to feel grief without losing sight of their daily responsibilities, but other people don't have those coping skills or the support they need. That hinders the grieving process. There are specific stages of grief. They reflect common reactions people have as they try to make sense of a loss. An important part of the healing process is feeling and accepting the emotions that come as a result of the loss. People go through common stages of grief. There's denial and numbness and shock. The numbness is a normal reaction to death or loss and should never be confused with not caring. This stage of grief helps protect us from experiencing the intensity of the loss. It can be useful when we have to take some action, such as planning a funeral, notifying relatives, or reviewing important papers. As we move through this process, we can slowly acknowledge its impact. Its initial denial and disbelief fades. There's also bargaining. Bargaining is when you say to yourself, well, I should have or I could have done this to prevent the death or loss. Some people become obsessed with thinking about specific ways or things that could have been done differently to save a person's life or prevent the loss. If this stage of grief isn't dealt with and resolved, the person may live with the intense feeling of guilt or anger that can interfere with the healing process. There's also depression. In this stage, you begin to realize and feel the true extent of death or the loss. Common signs of depression in this stage include trouble sleeping, poor appetite, fatigue, lack of energy, crying spells, things of that nature. We may also have self-pity and feel lonely, isolated, empty, lost, and anxious. Also, there's anger. This stage is very common. It usually happens when we feel helpless and powerless. Anger can stem from a feeling of abandonment because of a death or loss. Sometimes we're angry at a higher power, such as God, or at a doctor who care for the lost loved one, or towards life in general. And then there's acceptance. In time, we can come to terms with all the emotions and feelings we experience when the death or the loss happen. Healing can begin once the loss becomes integrated into our set of life experiences. Throughout our lives, we may turn to some other earlier stages of grief, such as depression or anger, because there are no rules or time limits to the grieving process. Everyone's healing process will be different. Sometimes we can impede or slow down the process of healing following a death or a loss. And then that includes things like avoiding emotions, compulsive behaviors, minimizing feelings, overworking on the job, misusing drugs and other substances as a way to deal with emotional discomfort. And what you have to start doing to help resolve the grief process is first you need to acknowledge and accept both positive and negative feelings. Allow plenty of time to experience thoughts and feelings. Confide in a trusted person about the loss. Express feelings openly or write in your journal. Writing in a journal really helps to write down your feelings, how you're feeling about the person, about the death, about the loss, about whatever it is that has you, going through this grieving process. And also, another thing you could do is if you're bereaving, you're going through something because of a death or a loss, find a group, like a bereavement group. And that way you're around other people who are having the same feelings that as you are, and you guys can be a support to each other. And remember, if you have to cry, go ahead and cry, because crying can provide a way of release, and it's really healthy for you. And also, seek professional help if your feelings are overwhelming. I can't express that enough. Always seek professional help, because, like I said, you don't want to go into a real deep-seated grief and depression. So seek professional help. If grief continues and causes a prolonged and deep depression with physical symptoms such as poor sleep, loss of appetite, weight loss, and even thoughts of suicide, you may have a condition known as complicated bereavement. Talk to your doctor as soon as possible. Sometimes a major depression can develop along with the normal feelings of loss and sadness linked with grief. Whereas normal sadness as part of a grief reaction may subside after several months, major depression is a medical disorder that is different from normal grief. It can occur at any time, even in the immediate aftermath of a death or loss, and it can require treatment to be resolved. So please, if you're feeling suicidal in any type of way, please seek professional help. And remember, you don't have to go through this alone. And as always, if you're feeling suicidal, please call the National Suicide Hotline. Thank you. This has been Minutes with Coach Missy.